There are people in your life right now whose presence feels safe, familiar, maybe even comforting. They might smile warmly, speak with kindness, and even rush to help when you stumble. But what if I told you that not all kindness is genuine, and not all help is help? Sometimes the greatest danger to your growth doesn't come from open hostility. It comes from the people who can reach you quietly. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But he wasn't just talking about your own thoughts and choices. He was also warning you about the unexamined people you let into your inner circle. And Carl Jung, thousands of years later, echoed this in his own way when he wrote about the shadow, the hidden aspects of personality we don't show the world and sometimes don't even admit to ourselves. The shadow doesn't just live in us, it lives in others too. And if you fail to see it, you can find yourself giving your trust, your energy, and your loyalty to people whose intentions run far deeper and far darker than they appear. From Plato's dialogues to modern neuroscience, the evidence is clear. We are wired to trust those who mirror our values. We are drawn to those who appear to soothe our fears, and our brains have trust shortcuts, little neural algorithms that tell us, if this person feels familiar, they must be safe. But here's the trap. Familiarity can be faked. In Plato's Republic, Socrates warns that the unjust man may appear just, and that the cleverest manipulator is the one who learns to wear the mask of virtue. Modern psychology confirms this through studies on impression management, showing how easily people can create a false front to gain influence, affection, or advantage. And so, over the centuries, patterns have emerged, archetypes, distinct ways that people can present themselves as harmless, even helpful, while quietly shaping your behavior to fit their own hidden needs. Over this series, we'll uncover 6 archetypes, 6 psychological masks that can sabotage your growth if you're not awake to them. Today, we begin with the first 2. The eternal martyr, the soul who gains power through endless suffering. The echo personality, the mirror that reflects you, not themselves. Archetype 1, the eternal martyr. In myth and religion, the martyr is celebrated, the selfless one who suffers for a higher cause. But in the psychological realm, there's a shadow version, the eternal martyr. This is the person whose entire identity is built on their suffering, and your role in alleviating it, the telltale pattern. Every story they tell ends with them being wronged. Every setback is someone else's fault. They recount injustice with poetic detail, but never once examine their own role. At first, your empathy kicks in. You offer help. You listen late into the night. You make sacrifices. But over time, the pattern emerges. They don't want the problem solved, because solving it would rob them of their most valuable currency, your pity. The philosophy behind it. Nietzsche wrote that some people cling to their suffering because it gives them meaning. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he warns of those who enjoy their weakness because it grants them moral high ground. From a scientific angle, social psychology calls this victim signaling. Studies from the University of British Columbia show that some individuals use displays of suffering strategically to manipulate others' perceptions and gain resources, whether emotional, social, or material. The eternal martyr thrives in this loop. Your compassion becomes their control. They don't just tell you their wounds. They subtly assign you the role of caretaker, therapist, or rescuer. And if you try to set boundaries, they'll imply you're abandoning them in their time of need. Real-world example. Imagine a colleague who constantly complains about being overworked and underappreciated. You take on some of their tasks to help. The next week, they return with a bigger list of grievances. The more you help, the more helpless they become, and the more guilty you feel for not doing more. It's not your imagination. you've been enlisted into a one-sided alliance. How to recognize it? Early, ask yourself, when I help this person, do things improve? Or do they return with the same problem in a new disguise? Jung would call this shadow fusion, when a person so identifies with their wounds that they unconsciously use them as a weapon. Archetype 2, the Echo personality. In Greek mythology, Echo was a nymph cursed to repeat only the words of others. In relationships, there is a similar figure, the Echo personality. This is the person who reflects you so perfectly, you feel instantly understood, maybe even soul-connected, the telltale pattern. They share your interests, your values, your dislikes, almost too perfectly. They agree with your opinions, even on complex issues. They compliment you in ways that feel like they've been studying you. At first, it's intoxicating. We all want to feel seen, and the human brain rewards similarity with trust. Studies in social cognitive and affective neuroscience show that perceived similarity activates the same brain regions as personal reward. But here's the problem. The Echo personality doesn't reveal their own core. They're not showing you who they are. They're constructing a version of themselves that will be most appealing to you. The philosophy behind it. Aristotle, in Nicomachean Ethics, argued that friendship requires truth, seeing each other as you are, not as you pretend to be. An Echo personality breaks this principle. They offer only reflection, never substance. From a psychological standpoint, this is adaptive mirroring taken to the extreme, a skill useful in diplomacy or sales, but devastating in close relationships. The hidden risk. Because they're attuned to your needs, they can earn deep trust quickly. But the loyalty is conditional, not to you, but to your approval. If you withdraw that approval, they can disappear overnight, or turn against you, armed with all the vulnerabilities you shared in confidence. Real-world example. Picture meeting someone new who laughs at every joke you tell, shares your taste in music, and seems to know exactly what to say when you're down. Then, months later, you realize you've learned almost nothing about their past, values, or independent goals. When you finally push for depth, they withdraw or change the subject. What felt like intimacy was actually performance. Archetype 3, the Velvet Saboteur. At first glance, the Velvet Saboteur is the most supportive person you know. They never yell, they never openly disagree. They speak in warm tones, often beginning sentences with, "I just want what's best for you." And yet, when you look back after months or years, you realize your dreams have been quietly shrunk, your risks avoided, your ambitions reduced to something reasonable. The method of undermining. The Velvet Saboteur doesn't use blunt criticism. They plant seeds of doubt. "That's a big risk. Are you sure?" "I love that idea. I just don't want you to be disappointed." "You're brave to try that. I'd never be able to handle failing like that." These phrases sound like concern, but they act like subtle chains. Neuroscience tells us that repetition strengthens neural pathways, meaning the more you hear doubts, the more your brain adopts them as your own. The philosophy behind it. Confucius warned, when it is obvious that the goals cannot be reached, do not adjust the goals, adjust the action steps. The Velvet Saboteur reverses this. They adjust your goals downward to fit their comfort zone. Psychologically, this archetype often stems from attachment anxiety. They fear losing their place in your life if you grow too far beyond them. If you succeed spectacularly, their own insecurities might feel unbearable. So they keep you within reach by keeping you small. Case study A 2020. Study on relational constraints in close friendships found that some people unconsciously hinder friends' upward mobility to preserve the existing dynamic. The Velvet Saboteur isn't always malicious, but the result is the same. You stop aiming for the extraordinary, recognizing the pattern. You leave conversations with them feeling less certain, not more. They use concern as a reason to slow you down. They celebrate your wins, but only if they're modest. The danger here is that your cage isn't built of bars. It's built of velvet. You stay because it feels comfortable. Archetype 4, the silent rival. The silent rival is perhaps the most difficult to detect because they can look exactly like a loyal supporter until you notice the small cracks. They cheer when you succeed, but always add a but. They share your victories, but quickly pivot to their own. They compliment you, but in ways that diminish the achievement. That's amazing for someone with your background. You're doing so well. I wish I had that much free time. The inner landscape Nietzsche used the term ressentiment to describe a psychological state where suppressed envy turns into subtle hostility. The silent rival doesn't hate you. They hate the reflection of their own unrealized potential that you cast back at them. From a neuroscience perspective, social comparison theory explains part of this. Humans measure self-worth relative to others in their social circle. Your success recalibrates that comparison, and if they feel they can't match it, they shift into quiet competition. Behavioral signs. They replicate your ideas but present them as their own. They downplay your news and redirect the conversation. They only offer full enthusiasm when they are ahead. Why they stay close. The silent rival stays near not to celebrate your journey, but to monitor it. They want proximity to your resources, your information, and your vulnerabilities, the better to position themselves advantageously. Historical parallel in the courts of Renaissance. Italy, courtiers mastered the art of apparent loyalty. Historian Baldassare Castiglione's The Book of the Courtier describes how proximity to power often breeds not devotion, but strategic rivalry. Archetype 5, the Sage of Shadows, perhaps the most seductive of all. The Sage of Shadows presents as a guide, mentor, or wise elder. Their speech is calm, their demeanor measured. They quote philosophy, spirituality, or psychology with ease. They seem above petty disputes, beyond ego. But this is often a crafted image, a persona designed to grant moral authority. Philosophical insight. Kant wrote about the moral law within, urging individuals to act from duty rather than appearance. The Sage of Shadows flips this. They act from appearance rather than duty, aiming to look morally or spiritually superior. In modern psychology, this often overlaps with spiritual bypassing, using spiritual language to avoid genuine self-examination. They cloak judgment in teaching moments and reframe your pushback as evidence of your immaturity. That sounds like a wound you haven't healed. You're still reacting. You have inner work to do. Power through calm. Because they never visibly lose composure, any emotional response you have can be painted as instability on your part. This dynamic can trap you in a cycle where the more you try to stand your ground, the more they frame you as not ready or still learning. Why it works. Humans have a deep cognitive bias toward the halo effect. If someone appears wise in one area, we tend to overestimate their wisdom in all areas. The Sage of Shadows exploits this, using perceived enlightenment as a shield against criticism. The risk. If you rely on them for guidance, you may slowly outsource your moral compass to their approval, mistaking control for clarity. Archetype 6, the empathic strategist. This archetype is the most deceptively disarming. The empathic strategist feels everything. They notice micro shifts in your tone, your body language, your mood. They are the first to comfort you when you're low, and they do it so well you might believe you found the most understanding soul alive. But over time, their sensitivity becomes the standard you must protect. You begin to self-censor to avoid upsetting them. You adapt your actions, your words, even your silences to keep them emotionally steady. The neuroscience connection research on mirror neurons, brain cells that fire both when we act and when we observe someone else acting, explains part of this. Highly empathic individuals often have more active mirror neuron systems, making them skilled at reading emotions. But unintegrated, this skill can become a means of control rather than connection. The psychological trap. Buddhist psychology teaches equanimity, the ability to be with emotions without clinging or aversion. The empathic strategist lacks this balance. Instead of managing their own waves, they ask you to rearrange the tides. When you fail, the roles flip. You become the insensitive one, the cause of their spiral. Signs you're caught. You feel responsible for their mood. You avoid honest conversations to keep the peace. Your own needs take a back seat to their reactions. Why it's dangerous. Over months or years, this dynamic can dissolve your sense of self. You become an emotional manager instead of an equal participant. The common thread. Though their masks differ, all 6 archetypes share a single hidden drive. They bend reality to preserve their position in your life, whether through pity, reflection, doubt, competition, authority, or sensitivity. Now that we've unmasked the 6 archetypes, the eternal martyr, the echo personality, the velvet saboteur, the silent rival, the sage of shadows, the empathic strategist, you might be feeling a creeping paranoia. How many of these people are in my life right now? This is where philosophy offers both warning and wisdom. Socrates insisted on relentless self-examination, but he also cautioned against letting suspicion corrode your humanity. Awareness should sharpen your perception, not poison your trust. If you walk away from this seeing enemies in every friend, you've missed the point. The goal is not to exile everyone who has flaws. It's to recognize patterns that are persistent, unexamined, and harmful over time. Before we talk about how to spot and handle these archetypes, we need to understand why they exist at all. From a psychological perspective, many of these behaviors are coping strategies born from early experiences. The eternal martyr may have learned that victimhood brought attention in childhood. The echo personality may have survived unstable environments by blending in perfectly. The velvet saboteur may fear abandonment if you grow too far beyond them. The silent rival may carry unhealed envy rooted in constant comparison. The sage of shadows may mask insecurity with a persona of control. The empathic strategist may have been rewarded for hyper-attunement as a way to keep peace in volatile homes. From a scientific perspective, our brains are pattern recognition machines wired for survival. Once a behavior works, even if it's manipulative, the brain tends to repeat it. Dopamine rewards the perceived success of getting needs met, even if the method is harmful to others. From a philosophical perspective, as Jung observed, most people are unaware of their own shadow. Without conscious effort, these traits remain unchecked, and the person doesn't even see themselves as manipulative. They see themselves as just surviving. Spotting these archetypes isn't about jumping to conclusions. It's about noting consistent patterns over time. Here are practical checkpoints. Track your emotional state after interactions. Do you leave feeling smaller, guilty, or drained? Or do you feel expanded, supported, and seen? Look for one-way energy flow. Is the benefit in the relationship balanced, or do they gain more than they give? Test for depth. If you ask a direct question about their own flaws, history, or accountability, do they deflect or engage honestly? Observe their response to your boundaries. Healthy people respect limits. Unhealthy patterns push, guilt trip, or reframe the boundary as an attack. Watch how they react to your success. Genuine allies celebrate wholeheartedly. Conditional allies make your win about themselves. Philosophical anchors for interaction 1. Marcus Aurelius, on the nature of others. In Meditations, he reminds us, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. None of them can hurt me. This is not cynicism, it's preparation. Expecting imperfection keeps you from shock and lets you respond with grounded clarity. 2. Aristotle, on virtue in relationships. True friendship, Aristotle says, is based on mutual virtue, willing the good for the other, for their sake, not yours. When you see that willingness replaced by self-serving patterns, you've moved out of the realm of true friendship. 3. The Buddha, on the middle path. Avoid extremes, neither blind trust nor cold suspicion. Awareness without aversion is the skill to cultivate, handling each archetype without unnecessary conflict. Here's how to respond, archetype by archetype. Eternal Martyr, offer empathy with boundaries. Ask, what steps do you plan to take? This shifts responsibility back to them. Echo personality, invite them to share their independent views. If they resist repeatedly, limit vulnerable sharing until authenticity is proven. Velvet Saboteur, thank them for concern, but reaffirm your vision. I appreciate your care. I've decided to take the risk anyway. Silent Rival, keep sharing general updates, but protect sensitive plans until they're complete. Avoid competing. Focus on your own path. Sage of Shadows, flip the script. That's an interesting perspective. What in your own experience led you to it? See if they can be self-reflective. Empathic strategist, clearly separate their feelings from your responsibility. I care about how you feel, but I can't carry it for you. Looking inward, avoiding becoming one of them. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Every single one of us has the capacity to wear these masks. When you feel unappreciated, you may slip into martyrdom. When you fear rejection, you may mirror more than express yourself. When you envy, you may minimize others' wins. When you want to feel in control, you may cloak it in help or wisdom. When you feel too much, you may expect others to tiptoe around you. The antidote? Conscious self-examination. Nietzsche's challenge, become who you are, is not about self-indulgence. It's about self-awareness. Identify the shadow before it runs your life unconsciously. Practical self-reflection. Questions. When I give advice, is it truly for their good or to feel superior? Do I celebrate others' wins even when I'm struggling? Do I take responsibility for my emotions or expect others to manage them? Do I adapt too much to fit in, losing my own voice? Do I sometimes use my struggles to gain sympathy rather than solutions? Journaling on these questions regularly is like installing a mirror in your own shadow. Key takeaways for your life. Patterns over moments. One-off comment doesn't define someone. Persistent patterns do. Boundaries are neutral. They're not punishments, they're definitions of where you end and another begins. Trust actions more than words. Words can charm. Consistent actions reveal character. Your energy is currency. Spend it where there's mutual return. Self-awareness is the best defense. You can't control others' shadows, only your openness to seeing them. The goal is not to live in suspicion. The goal is to live with eyes open. The more clearly you see these archetypes, both in others and in yourself, the less likely you are to be quietly reshaped by someone else's hidden agenda. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Make it conscious. Because the truth is, the shadows are always there, but so is your ability to walk in light.